Welcome to Focus on Scholarship. I'm Jaleh Rezaie, Associate Dean of Graduate Education and Research, and your host for today's session. Our goal at graduate school and university libraries is to bring a focus and awareness to the exciting scholarly and creative achievements of our academic community. Our guest today is Dr. Peter Kraska, a professor in the Department of Criminal Justice and Police Studies at Eastern Kentucky University. He also coordinates the graduate program in that department. Dr. Kraska has published numerous books and journal articles since coming to EKU in 1994. His scholarship has most recently focused on developing criminal justice theory and examining trends in crime control. He continues to pursue his interest in the blurring of U.S. military and police forces, particularly in light of recent terrorist activities. This work has been featured heavily in the media, including news pieces featuring his research in The Economist, Washington Post, New York Times, National Public Radio, Peter Jennings' World News Tonight, and the Jim Lehrer NewsHour. Welcome, Dr. Kraska.
Thank you.
As I mentioned in the introduction, your earlier work focusing on militarization of police has received much media attention as well as academic acclaim, and apparently continues to be of interest. Tell us a little about this research and how it has informed some of the work you do in the classroom.
I started this research back in 1990, actually, and it came really from working with students. I was teaching at the time at Kent State University, and I had a couple of students that were interested in some of the topics I was talking about, and they invited me to go on a Coast Guard ship with them and watch the blurring of law enforcement functions and military functions firsthand. And that experience, and then several other experiences, really got me interested in how, beginning in the late 1980s, how the military and the police's functions were really starting to blur in the war on drugs. That led to a couple of major research projects looking at the growth and normalization of SWAT teams in the United States. And I was able to document some pretty interesting trends with regard to the militarization of civilian police. And that captured the attention of the media, which was much to my surprise. And I've been doing that kind of work now off and on for quite a few years.
Well, you mentioned started with students, and you self-identify as student-centered scholar. Could you expand on what that means and how it translates into your research agenda?
One of the things that really, I guess the primary thing that has always really motivated me and kept me passionate about what I'm doing is working with students. And so when I think in terms of a new research project or something I'd like to work on, I never think of it as a sole endeavor. The earlier research I was just talking about with the militarization of policing, I worked with one of our current professors, Derek Paulson, as a master's student, and we published together. And he was an exciting student and really interested in it and worked hard doing some ground level research in a police department with SWAT teams. And so I've taken that approach and I've used it for the past 20 years. And a lot of times what happens is that as I'm teaching about something and something I'm interested in, a student will come to me and say, boy, I have an interesting story about that, or I'm really interested in that, and then we'll end up working on something together. So all of these projects have been highly collaborative. It's not I just send them away and have them do some kind of lit review for me. I really try to substantively involve them in all aspects of the research.
which leads me to the next question. Is you work with a lot of your work has been done with graduate students, and as you mentioned, they sort of identify topics. Is this always done by the students, and you get interested in what the students are interested in? And I also would like to know, how is this type of work that you do with the students compatible with or not with your own research agenda? Is there differences, or
my research agenda has always coincided with student interests. And so, and it goes both ways. Sometimes students will come to me with an idea or something interesting they've noticed, and sometimes I'm talking to them about something I've noticed and are interested in, and we end up working together on it. So for example, we just published a piece in Justice Quarterly, which is our flagship journal in our field, on steroid trafficking. That wasn't my idea. It was something I was always interested in, performance-enhancing drugs and steroids and its connection into hypermasculinity and all of that kind of thing, but I had never really thought about researching it. And a student in a research methods class said, I'd like to do a research-based project that would be kind of an ethnography, qualitative field research. And I know people that are involved in using and dealing in steroids, and could I do something like that? Of course, this was the days before the IRB, and so it wasn't a big deal just to say, yeah, go check it out and explore it. And so he ended up doing a 1.5, 2-year-long study on that with me. And just last year we published the first piece that's ever been done on steroid trafficking, and that was done with 3 other graduate students, all of whom were substantively involved in the whole project. So that's one model. Another model is I'll bring up an idea in class and the student's really interested in it, and then we'll work on it together.
Speaking of methodology, you recently published a textbook on research methodologies. Your own research methodology is generally mixed methods, and you often refer to critical perspective in your work. Can you speak a little bit about your preferred methodology and how a critical perspective informs your research agenda?
Sure. Writing a encyclopedic type research methods textbook was a massive undertaking, one that I hope anyone would take my advice and not try to do themselves. A ridiculous amount of work, but it also made me realize how the rich variety of social science methods we have available to us, the social science disciplines have always sort of made this distinction between quantitative and qualitative research, and often self-identified as one or the other, which creates sort of opposing camps. And what I tried to do in the book is really emphasize the potential for mixing quantitative and qualitative, which is what I tend to do in my own work. And so just as a quick example, I worked with John Brent. I was teaching a research methods class again, and I mentioned a website that I had seen labeled Felony Fights, where some DVD-oriented upstart is finding prisoners that have just been released from prison and pays them $500 to go out to a parking lot or a beach somewhere and engage in really brutal, violent hand-to-hand combat, and they're paid for it, and he videotapes the whole thing and then he sells it on the internet and makes a lot of money doing it. And I was talking just about all the political and cultural ramifications of this, and it happened that one of my students was trained in what they call mixed martial arts, and he said, this is a research project that I think I'd really be well suited for and interested in. So anyway, he ended up doing a 2-year-long ethnography on that topic, IRB approved, by the way. Mm-hmm. And it really turned out to be a fascinating study, but he mixed quantitative and qualitative research in that particular study, which really helped us get a better feel for not only the micro processes involved in this cage fighting and mixed martial arts sort of combat phenomenon, but also the bigger implications, cultural implications, political implications, economic implications. So that's sort of where my critical side comes in.
Thank you. And that brings us to our last questions, which actually is very important. I'm interested to know, how do you balance such robust research agenda with your administrative, teaching, and family responsibilities? In other words, how would you advise a new faculty member at EKU of how to balance everything?
Well, a new faculty member doesn't have the luxury of doing what I do, which is, not responding to emails and not showing up to a meeting occasionally and holding myself away in the office and working. So it's a little bit different. Being an academic is a strange profession because you never get to go home and just turn it off. And particularly if you're doing a lot of research and writing, your brain is generally engaged all of the time. And one of the things I've had to learn to do is disengage and compartmentalize and spend really good quality engaged time with my family and then try to fit in the other stuff.
That's it for this edition of Focus on Scholarship. I'd like to thank our guest, Dr. Kraska. Please join us next time as we continue our series of webcast celebration of scholarly and creative achievements of faculty and staff at Eastern Kentucky University.